Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Star-Lord's latest uniform, seeing how it compares with the previous uniform and how it fares overall. I know the character review videos are a little bit late. I couldn't really find enough time to fit them in last weekend since I had to do that X of Swords and Otherworld battle stream where I covered a bunch of different tactics that you can use in Otherworld battle, as well as different techniques and strategies that you can use in that mode and in building up your sword collection or items for your overall account. So if you haven't watched that, I really recommend you check it out, or at least just scrub through it, since there's kind of important information and tips that might help you out throughout the whole video. As I mentioned in the Sharon Rogers video, I'm not going to be T4ing all of the characters that come out now, because I largely don't really need them for my account, so I'm only going to be focusing on the ones that are particularly for PvP, or the ones that help me push to higher stages of World Boss Legend, or possibly help me on certain days of Alliance Battle Legend. Before I show the testing footage, just note that I am using a mighty CTP of Destruction throughout this whole video. I previously had that on the character, and from some initial tests in the beginning, I found that he was proc friendly and definitely worked with it, so that's the one that I'm going to be showcasing throughout. With the latest uniform, Star-Lord gets a substantial damage increase and becomes much easier to play. You can see on stage 34 of Knull, with that mighty CTP of Destruction, no strikers, no supports, and without even using his leadership, I was able to complete the first phase within about a minute and 30 seconds. And even though my rotation at the end was a little bit short, I did practically end up finishing the stage with around 50 seconds remaining. For reference, his previous uniform was a little bit tougher to play since you had to delay one of his skills, otherwise you kind of mismanaged the proc timing and end up not getting the most out of your 5-second proc. But besides that, his previous uniform does much less damage than the new one. You can see from this clip that he can't really do the first phase of Knull, since he was only able to do about 15 health bars in that 2-minute window, whereas with the new uniform he reached that 46 health bar mark around a minute and 20 seconds faster. If you want to use the character for PvE, which is what I would recommend, and what the character's kit is most suited for, a CTP of Energy or Destruction are great options. He is proc friendly, and it will help you to push to higher stages of World Boss and World Boss Legend. However, if you want to try and score higher in score-based modes like Alliance Battle Extreme or Alliance Battle Legend, possibly even in Giant Boss Raid, might perform better, a CTP of Rage is your most ideal option there. If you were curious to see how the character performed once I ended up using his leadership, 2 supports, and full strikers, he basically cleared the same mode 2 minutes faster. Most people are probably going to be eyeing Star-Lord for Alliance battle modes, since he has his own leadership as well as the added support from Rocket now. So for the male blast day, he is one of the top options and seems to perform pretty well. I was able to score around 9 million or close to it with this particular setup, and the only downside with his latest uniform is that he is lacking paralysis, so you don't have that for that particular season. He has burn and silence. However, if you were able to get him to T4, you can rectify that problem just by equipping a striker that has paralysis on it. And when I say top option, I only mean that he can get to T4, so you can probably do this pretty easily if you have something like a Rage build. But for most people that have Magneto, this is basically an easy cap without much effort, so he's actually going to be more useful in Alliance Battle Legend for the male alien day than Alliance Battle Extreme. Surprisingly, the character does really well with a mighty CTP of Destruction, even in Giant Boss Raid, where a Rage is oftentimes better. With the ultimate and the mighty Destruction proc and top proc, he can basically one-shot the second part of the first phase, and I was able to complete the fight entirely with around 6 minutes and 30 seconds left, and I don't even have his artifact, which improves his performance even more in this particular mode and score-based modes, since it increases his damage versus alien types. Just by getting the character to level 80, not even touching his gears or his skill levels or anything else, he was able to improve his clear time on stage 34 without using those strikers, supports, or his leadership by about a minute and 25 seconds. Then by adding in his leadership, 2 supports, and strikers, he was able to go up to stage 79 with that same build and complete it with around a minute and 30 seconds left. Usually T4s improve clear times by about a minute, so you can see that Star-Lord does have room to grow if you're able to get that T4 upgrade, but you can clearly see that he doesn't necessarily need it, and you can get a lot of value from the character just by getting him to level 80, especially for World Boss Legend content. Versus stage 69 of Mephisto with that complete setup of strikers, leaderships, and supports, I was able to complete the first phase in about 60 seconds, which means that he should be able to complete the fight because he can complete the first part in that short window, but I found that I wasn't able to actually clear the stage because he just ended up dying so easily from the damage that Mephisto deals. He not only got one-shotted, but even if he got hit by the lingering damage from Mephisto, he often would die and wouldn't be able to heal up. So versus him specifically, that T4 will be very useful, and versus possibly other bosses like Gorr or Jean, it should be useful there as well, because the T4 not only provides healing, but also improves his base HP by about 50% at max level, I believe. Even though Gorr is meant to be a more difficult boss because of the amount of health he has, I found he was much easier to deal with Star-Lord because his attack patterns are more predictable. He deals a lot more upfront damage, so you can avoid that, whereas for Mephisto he has kind of lingering damage. Gorr doesn't have that, so it's a lot easier to not accidentally walk into a pool of fire and then just end up dying because you can't heal in time. You do have to be careful though and dodge attacks, so that will eat up from your clear time. However, if you are able to get that T4, I think that you can probably tank through some of that damage, so it should improve your clear time even more because of the defensive capability it provides, and also because it provides a huge damage increase too. Besides World Boss Legend, Alliance Battle Legend is likely where people will use him, specifically for that male hero alien day to try and replace Thor, which he kind of does because he's easier to play, but he doesn't necessarily end up scoring much higher than Thor. He's sort of like the comparison of maybe Namor or Moon Knight to Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus can score higher a little bit, but is much easier to play, so that is one of the reasons why people build him. You also have to keep in mind that both Thor and Star-Lord are missing a potential support for their team, so whoever gets that first could potentially outscore the other, and with Groot now announced getting the T3, if he has a support function that targets Star-Lord, he could end up outscoring Thor that way. You can see that even at level 80, I didn't really fare too well with the Mighty Destruction, and you really kind of need a CTP of Rage to be able to access his usability in this mode. His rotation is really simple and procs pretty consistently. To maximize the use of his T3 skill, you basically do 1 cancel, 2 cancel, 5 cancel, 3 cancel, 4, and the 4th skill is the one that you want to proc on with all of the other skills going on at the same time. When you have your T3 skill unlocked, you would basically do the same rotation, but sub out the 4th skill for the T3 skill. Versus Dormammu, his clear time only improved by 10 seconds when I got him from level 70 to 80, so it seems that the level 80 upgrade doesn't really have much of an effect in Giant Boss Raid, not nearly as much as it does in World Boss Legend. I would say that the character doesn't have too much value in PvP, at least versus the kind of higher metas. His survival isn't really too great, even though he has basically 4 partial iframes in his kit out of 5 total skills. His AI often prioritizes the 4th skill first, which pretty much eats up his healing skill, so that if he gets hit at any point after that, you basically have to wait a full rotation for him to be able to heal to use that 4th skill again. This is why I went with a Mighty Destruction, not only to get PvE usage, but also because he ends up not surviving too long, so I want to make the most out of it when he's alive by getting that extra penetration and the proc damage. but also because he has lingering damage skills like his 5th skill that even if he ends up dying could potentially wipe out the opponent. You can see that even though he might struggle versus some top meta characters or ones that have a lot of iframe ignore, versus mid-level characters he does perform pretty solidly because he has so many different partial iframes, and the opponents might struggle to be able to hit him, and he could potentially interrupt their skills by going into those iframes and dealing damage to them while they can't do the same to him. Based off this, one of the strategies I used in Alliance Conquest was to use that Mighty CTP of Destruction to burst them down quickly and pair him with a character that has an invincible build so that if he ends up dying, whoever's left over can potentially win the set. In this case, it was Rocket Raccoon, who has the invincible build and also provides support to Star-Lord to increase his burst potential and wipe out the opponents quickly. You can see that the result was the same for 2 different sets. Star-Lord was able to burst down the opponents quickly, and then Rocket was able to survive the last character and win the fight. I believe that most people will already have Star-Lord built up from one of the epic quests, so this uniform isn't really a must-have, but it is a nice-to-have for things like World Boss Legend and for Alliance Battle Legend, specifically if Groot does end up getting a support function for Star-Lord, which would make one of those particular days even easier to score in. The character kind of reminds me of an energy-based Moon Knight. He's proc-friendly, does well in score-based modes, and does pretty well in World Boss and Giant Boss Raid too. Even with that, it's kind of hard for me to recommend this uniform, mostly because there's so many good blast types already out. Sharon Rogers, for example, just preceded Star-Lord, and she does amazing in World Boss Legend. So I'd probably say that unless you have some of the other blast characters built up with their latest uniforms and up to level 80, then Star-Lord is one that you could potentially consider. I know this video is a little bit late considering the uniform and CTP unequip discount has ended, but unfortunately I couldn't get it out sooner. If you want to potentially get some of this information earlier, I sometimes make posts on Discord when I can't release the videos right away. So if you join my Discord, you could get that information earlier and potentially make some decisions before the videos come out. In the next video, I'll be looking at Rocket and Mantis's upgrades and seeing how good those are. So if you're interested to see my take on them, then be sure to check out that video. That pretty much does it for this one. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful or helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and possibly sharing it with others. I always appreciate people taking the time to watch my videos, so thank you, but the video is now over.